Hi Grace Church, great to be back with you again, and we're back into Philippians chapter 2 and we're looking at verses 19 to 30. Today we're looking at the theme of difference makers. These are the type of people we need in our life that we can depend upon no matter what. And so they're going to have some particular characteristics and we're going to learn about them today. But just a quick reminder, Paul is under house arrest in Rome. He's in a villa rented at his own expense. He can't go out. He's in lockdown. So all those people in Victoria, you can relate to this. But people are free to come and go as they like to visit him. And as such, he's having a great influence in Rome. People from all walks of life are coming to meet him. Servants, soldiers, high-level officials in Caesar's household are hearing and responding to the gospel. What Paul realises and what he rejoices about to the Philippian church is that he couldn't do this unless there was people like the Philippians who were supporting him and helping him, and other very dependable people around him. And so Paul goes on to describe in chapters 2, verses 19 to 30, the character and dependability qualities of two people close to him that demonstrate this just so well. And that is Timothy and Epaphroditus. It's like he pauses actually in his book in his letter to the Philippians, and in a sense he's been writing the theory of what it means to be a citizen of the gospel, how to have partnerships that matter, how to have what sort of conduct is required in relationship to each other, and what reflects the conduct of a heavenly citizen. And of course he upholds Jesus as being the best example for us to follow, and says we need an attitude just like him. But in a sense, you could argue that these are it's still rather theoretical. And so to bring it home, he points out two people that the Philippians know. They've met Timothy and they've met, and Epaphroditus was sent actually from them to Paul to help in his time of suffering and in imprisonment. And so he's saying, I want you to consider these guys, because if you look at their life, you're going to learn something about what it means to be dependable, what it means to be difference makers. So let's actually read about them. So if you turn to your Bibles, Philippians chapter 2, and we're reading from verses 19 to 30. And it says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare, for everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker and fellow soldier. So then welcome him in the Lord with great joy and honour people like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give me. Man, any leader would love to have these guys on their team. I mean, their characteristics and qualities are just outstanding. I've got some pretty good people on my team. I'm glad they're on my team. But I think these guys are still at another level because I'd like to be like them. Now, what I've discovered over my years of Christian service, there are a lot of people who know how to talk the talk, but there are a few who will walk the talk. And I myself, I think I've been guilty of that. And so, if you like Paul, what he's saying is, when things get tough, and there was times when he was abandoned, he soon finds that there's people that he thought were close to him and thought they were dependable, soon abandoned him. But it was only a very special few that actually stuck with him through thick and thin. You know, Amanda and I discovered that when we planted a church, there was a couple who came to us and showed us great promise, and they were just so keen to be with us and to start the work with us. And man, they had so many talents. Wife was like, "Yeah, I'll run your women's ministry for you." And the husband, he was a singer, he was a songwriter, playing guitar. He was so talkative, he was so outgoing, and they just gathered people so well. And we thought, wow, this is wonderful. These guys are with us. And so in effect, we made them like our assistant leaders, assistant pastors. But then And so we were having meetings together, planning meetings, visionary times together. And then just before we started publicly, almost like 3 weeks out, they decided, you know what, Greg, we've decided that, this church planting, but we've done all that before and we really don't want to go back to it. Putting out chairs week in, week out, setting up in a school hall, that's just... Yeah, we've been there, done that, and, we think we need to move on. And so before I even started, I had people who left me. That's not a good start. But anyway, about 6 months later, they actually came back. And we decided, with some they had some humility. And so we said, we'll come back on board. And so they were with us for the next 3 years, and they proved to be really useful and great people. But then suddenly, after 3 years, they left us again. And then sadly, after 2 years, they actually broke up and split up as a couple. And so that was a bit of a sad story. But what it showed is that sometimes the most obvious people aren't necessarily the most dependable people. Because we had this other guy who started with us at the same time. He was there from the very first Sunday. And he was there on our last Sunday. And you know what? I still believe he's probably there at that church now, 18 years later. And he was a guy who's named Dave. He was not wealthy. He was not a musician. He didn't have any outstanding talents. He was just Dave, the family man. He was a storeman and packer, and not to say that anything, he just had a very average job, but he brought friends. He stacked chairs, he cleaned up, he sacrificially gave regularly, he gave his time, he was there for his friends. He was there week in, week out, rain, hail or shine, and he was dependable. Paul says we need to honour men like this. We need to honour men like this, and women, of course. We need to honour people like these, people you can depend upon. Becoming a great disciple of Jesus will actually mean that you can become a type of person that others will rely upon. The type that the kingdom of God is advanced with are the ones who are dependable. So today, what can we learn from Timothy and Epaph for short? From their character that reveals true dependability. And the first one is we need to know that people who are difference makers, they are people who care. And verse 20, we see that. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. And verse 25, whom you sent out to take care of my needs. Have you ever sat down with someone hoping to have a good conversation, a good two-way conversation, to hear and to share bits and pieces about your life and mutually encourage one another, but really all you find out is everything about them and they don't ask anything about you. And they'll actually get up at that after a time of conversation and say, well, didn't we have a marvellous time together? And say thank you very much and go on their way. Some people just have that ability to totally consume your time with themselves. Now, I'm sure there's no one like that in Grace Church. But how refreshing it is when someone can actually sit down with you and they share what's going on for them and be aware enough to say, hey, what's going on for you? And then actually give you genuine time to hear you respond and to share with them. I thought I did this sort of conversation okay. And, that's why I became a pastor. I wanted to care for people and to help them. It wasn't until I actually met a pastor from Fiji, Pastor Tomasi, and he's been here one weekend. And he's the type of guy who remembers every single detail about your life. And so you've met him once, and then you meet him again, and it feels like you've known him for years, as he just simply asks you questions about what's going on with your family, your children, how's that situation going for you, are you progressing in life? Our good friend Peter McHugh, he's much like that. He has genuine interest, genuine care for the people that he interacts with. When I saw Pastor Tomasi walk through the marketplace, I just couldn't believe just how many people he knew. And everyone, he just stopped, he put his hand on their shoulder, he interacted with them. He gave them genuine time and space to interact with. And they knew they were special to him and that he genuinely cared for them. And when he said, I pray for you, I'll pray for you, he actually did. That blew me away. I mean, I think his list must be endlessly long. And I'm guilty when I've said to people, look, I'll pray for you. And I've had to remind myself a week later, oh my gosh, I didn't do that. And so it's good to know, if we're Christians, if we're going to say, I pray for you, we actually do. Now, to help me in those situations, I'll do it right there and then. I'll do it on the phone if I'm talking to someone on the phone. I'll try and do it immediately after I've left with somebody. I'll bring their request before the Lord so that I know that I've fulfilled my words to them, and that when I say that I'll pray for someone, I actually do mean it. Now, that's something I've had to bring a practice in my life. You might not have a problem in that area, but I think, you know what? It's probably the words "I'll pray for you" are probably thrown around a little bit too often with not with great effect. How about we actually mean what we say? So, dependable people, they're people who care for us. They're the type of people who look us in the eye and they're thinking, what can I do for you right now that's going to make a difference? What do you need that I can provide? How can I care for you? So genuine care for someone's welfare, you know what? That's the meal at the door when somebody's sick. It's the provision of resource in a time of great turbulence. It's the offer of a car when they have no transport. It's the payment towards medical expenses when some sickness strikes. It's doing whatever is necessary until someone knows they have been loved and not just put to one side to get out of the way. For that to happen, it takes time, and you have to live slow enough so that there is time to respond and to actually feel what's in somebody's heart. I find if I live at a hectic pace, there's just no time to be compassionate for the people that are around me. And so I'll just sort of bump off them, and what I bring to them is not genuine. Dependable people are people who care, who will take the time to do what is needed to show genuine love. Secondly, dependable people, they act as family. In verse 22 and verse 25, we see the words son and brother are used in regards to Timothy and Epaphras. Timothy was regarded as a son to Paul, and Epaphras, well, he was like a brother. Dependable people will treat you like family. You know, this is not a contractual type of love. You know, contractual love says, I will if you will, and I won't if you don't. Rather, this is a covenantal love. In other words, I'll love you like you're my own. And regardless of your behaviour towards me, I've made a choice to love you. I mean, that's what parents do to their children, who muck up every day and who blow it. But we say to them, you know what? I love you regardless. And this is what the type of love we need to bring to each other. When someone can say, Timothy, they are like a son to me. When that person can say, Paul, they're like a father to me, that is huge. And in that moment, they've defined the relationship as being intentional and valuable. Women do this far better than men, I think, in the closeness of their relationships that they express. But men need to do it. We can't just say, well, that's a woman thing. No, men need to move closer to one another and be willing to declare, hey, mate, you are my brother. You're not just an acquaintance. You're not just a working mate. You're not just a this. You're actually my brother, and I deeply care for you. And we need to find fathers, men that are older than us, that we can come into relationship with us, who we can learn wisdom and strength from and great courage. And, Paul makes it really clear. And I say that for women who can need to find mothers in the faith. Paul tells us, look, you can have many teachers, but you'll have few fathers, or you'll have few parents. The parents in the faith are the ones who will carefully walk through highs and lows and walk the journey of life and see truth and grace and wisdom have its way in us and pray with us through those times. Man, you need brothers who are dependable, who will have your back, who you can share your deepest fear and they say, no worries, I'm here for you. Not so much accountability, like I'm your accountability mate. That says I'm going to bring judgment and law upon you. No, we don't need lawgivers around us. We need grace givers around us, grace empowerers around us. We need brothers who will stand with us thick and thin. I've learnt to value such relationships as I've grown older, and I wished I'd actually spent more intentional time when I was younger to form those. But the few that I do have, I'm now building up years of relationship with, 14 years to 32 years of real contact, and I'm looking forward to the relationships that I'm building up here that I'm moving into. We've been here 4 years, but there are some special relationships I know that are building into great friendships. I'm not afraid, like Paul, to tell them, I love them. I need you in my life. I'm grateful for them. You are my brother. You are like my son. You are like a father to me. And so I just want to remind us that dependable people are like good family, not dysfunctional family, but good, solid family to us. The third point, dependable people, difference makers, they are willing to serve. This word serve really does come up a lot during Philippians, and I think it's something that Paul does want us to get hold of. Verse 22 says, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. Verse 30, he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help. Dependable people are not just observers or armchair experts. They are the ones that are willing to get their hands dirty. They don't walk past a mess and say someone else will clean it up, because someone is usually never found and nobody ever does it. And so really that someone has to be you. A dependable person decides to be that someone who will step in and make a difference. They pitch in at the right moment. But this sort of thing has to be learnt, or maybe even enforced from a father to a son, because it's actually not just naturally done. Most of us will gladly take the easiest way out and rather be served than to be of service to others. And so it's not uncommon that I did when growing up with my boys, and I picked them up from youth ministry. They might be keen to get home and watch a movie or play Xbox or something like that. But I say, hang on, no, we're not leaving yet until we've helped the leader. We've helped whoever it is. It might be Brendan here all by himself packing up 200 plus chairs or setting them out the chairs. But I wanted to make sure my boys knew that it was more important that we serve to the end, helping the leader, than just running off because that was the convenient thing to do. So many people feel they're entitled to observe the willingness of others. Ouch. I'll say that again. So many people feel they're entitled to observe the willingness of others. And that is... we just can't live that way. That's not the Jesus way. Some have said to me, look, I'm in deep conversation. I just can't help, brother. I saw this at a function once. A whole group of people just watched on while a few packed up tables and put out chairs. And I just think, this is not the Jesus way. None of us are entitled to observe. I've had conversations with people who've said, look, don't ask me to serve. I've done my years of serving. I'm here to receive now. And I said, well, that's okay. If you're sick, we're here to help you. If you're burnt out for a season, we want to see you get healed. But after you're done being healed, then actually live, step up into living healed. And that means be obedient to Scripture, be obedient to the example that Jesus set, and find your place in the family to serve. If we are disciples of Jesus, we're all here not for our own interests, but to serve the interests of Jesus. There is only one entitled not to serve, and he even said, he even showed us by laying aside his glory, he came and he washed our feet. There should not be a ministry in the church short of someone to help. Basically, if there's a need, I should have the problem of having too many people with their hands up rather than the opposite is true. But I know we all have different seasons in our life, and we all have different times that we can give and make a contribution. But on the whole, serving is something that we're all required to do. Ephesians 6:7 says, serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people. And I think that's really is the key. So many people get their eyes fixed on who they're serving, as in a person, and then they easily get disappointed when that person might speak to them badly or inappropriately or in some way offend them or disappoint them. But you know what? If you can look past the person that you've been instructed by to serve and know that you're actually serving Jesus in that moment, then that will change everything. That's what's helped me get through 26 years now ministry life, serving in the life of the church, from cleaning toilets through to preaching on the platform, yes, and being honoured at special moments. But there's been a lot of just the packing up chairs over those years. But what I look through who I'm actually serving to the point of knowing it's Jesus I'm serving, and that has helped me a lot. Some people I know need to actually slow down a bit from they serve too much. These are the ones who usually have it as their spiritual gift. But there's really few of those people who have it as their spiritual gift. On the whole, all of us just need to put our hand up and say, I'm willing, I'm willing. And so dependable people are needed all the time to serve across all our ministries. We have avenues in our Kingdom Kids, creche when we get going again, men's ministry, youth ministry, hospitality, pastoral care, there's welcome teams, the worship ministry. Across every area of our life in our church, we need people to actually say, I'm willing to serve. Because it's not just about what we do for each other. This is then seen on the outside as well. People observe us and go, wow, don't those guys know how to love each other, serve each other well? And then when we get into the community, my goodness, we bring incredible value to people who we reach out to, because they see our service, they see our genuine love and care. So everyone plays a part, and it's all valuable in benefiting the whole of who we are as one family. The fourth dependable characteristic that people that these guys have been described as, they are able to represent as sent ones. They are able to represent. Verse 23 and verse 25, Paul describes Timothy and Epaphras as messengers. In other words, dependable people are ones which you can send to represent you or your organisation well. I'm just grabbing a drink. There'll be no difference in the values of the people they represent. In other words, when they sent out, they're either sent out from Paul, they represent Paul. When they represent their, in today's terms, if you go out representing your company, you represent the full values of your company. They're messengers. They're dependable as messengers, as representing the ones who sent them. I remember buying some electrical goods from a certain retailer, and I had a problem with them, and so I rang up the lady on the phone and described the situation to her, and she basically just said to me, look, that's your problem, it's not ours. And I thought, that's not good enough. That actually doesn't represent the values that these people advertise about. And so, and it occurred to me that they weren't customer focused at all. Anyway, so I thought, well, I'm going to speak to the manager, because I'm sure if there's anyone who has the values and the vision of the company, it would be the manager. And when I spoke to him about the situation, he said, not a problem, we'll fix that for you. And so I was just filled with great confidence that this manager was representing the company well, and it actually won me over as a customer again. And it'd be great if more businesses out there actually operated that way. I think there'd be a lot more happy customers. Also, the word that Paul is using here in the Greek is actually the same word that we use for apostle, is apostolos, and meaning I sent one, but it's actually the depth of the message they carries means that they're a delegate with orders. In other words, they're dependable people, people to represent the one they're sent from to someone else in the fullness of the one who is sending them. An ambassador is typical of this. Ambassadors come to another country. They come with their values, their customs and their culture, and they represent the leadership, and they do that by representing it to the other country, to the leaders of another. And so when the ambassadors are talking together, it's like the very president of each country is talking to each other. They're representing the fullness of their country to another country. And it's the same for us disciples. If we're disciples of Jesus, we are to represent Jesus to the people around us, to the world around us. That's our job. That's what a messenger is. That is a sent one. That is the heart of an apostle. In this word is derived from, in the Greek, in the Roman setting, and they used the word to describe the governors that would be sent out with armies that would take over new territory, and they would go into those regions. They would be the apostolos, the apostles, to bring culture, the Roman culture, into those new regions that have just been conquered. And so that's what Paul is doing. He's using this word and he's saying, I want you to be messengers. Dependable people are messengers because they bring the heart, the culture, the trueness of who they're representing. And in Paul's case, he says, I'm sending to the Philippian church, I send you Timothy. He will represent you. He will represent me, Paul, to you, the Philippians. Just as Epaphroditus has been sent from you, Philippians, he has represented you, your care, your love. He's represented that to me, and he rejoices in that, and he's really grateful of that. And then, in fact, he sends Timothy and Epaphroditus back to the Philippians, so that there's this mutual joy that's shared because of the sharing of care, of the situations they're in, the advancements of the gospel. And so everyone's rejoicing because they're representing each other to each other. You know, it takes a lot to be a sent one because it means you have to lay aside your own agenda and your own interests to bring the benefit of the one you are sent from to the benefit of the other. In verse 21, Paul says of Timothy, I don't have anyone else like him. What a great thing to say. I don't have anyone else like Timothy. And so I'm sending you to him. Why? Because most people look out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But in fact, he's saying, you can be sure of this. When Timothy comes to you, he's not only just going to represent me, but he's going to represent Jesus to you. The fullness of all the interests of Jesus, the benefits and blessings that Jesus wants to bring you. He's going to represent that to you because that's the type of guy he is. He is dependable. He is a messenger that you can believe in. Dependable people will look out for the interests of Jesus to you. The fifth thing, dependable people, they are willing to work. They are willing to work. Verse 22 says, but you know that Timothy has proved himself because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. And verse 25, Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker. When I read that verse 22 about Paul talking about Timothy has proved himself because as a son, he has worked with me, his father. It takes me back to the times I worked with my dad on building sites, and as a 12-year-old just knocking around, he showed me how to use a nailing gun, and apart from shooting birds and pigeons, I did actually nail a few pieces of wood, and I fortunately avoided my toes. But it was such a joy to work with a father when you're alongside and to learn the craft, to learn the skill. And that's what Paul is saying about Timothy. Timothy has worked alongside, and he can vouch that Timothy is a worker because he's worked alongside him for the cause of the gospel, and he's learnt the gospel, he's learnt the trade from Paul. And this gospel is salvation by grace. We don't receive a gospel of works. We receive a gospel that is built upon God's grace to us, his gift to us. But, the spread of the gospel beyond us, the teaching of it, the presentation of it, the service of it to others, it basically means hard work. It does. Like putting on a carols production in a weekend, and I think of the one we did last December, and it would be a joy to be able to do it again. But anyway, reminiscing on last December, we set up all these booths for children's work, for food distribution, drinks distribution, jumping castles. We had a big, magnificent stage, and we decorated and we filled it with items and acts. That took all day to prepare. It took weeks to practice. It was hard work. And on the night, we sang beautiful songs that reached out with the love of Jesus, with the gospel. that gospel was given freely. That love was shared freely, as nobody had to pay anything for it. But it took hard work to make it happen. And basically, that's what it does require of us, church. If we're going to make a difference in this world, if we're going to make a difference in Port Macquarie, if we're going to make a difference beyond even for what War Hope is for us, it's going to take some hard work. And it's going to take dependable people to come in and get willing to get their hands dirty to extend the gospel out into those places. You know, we've put together 50 hampers and then packed them all up, put them in cars and taken them out into drought-affected areas. Can you believe it? We were talking about drought this time last year, and we're out in Somerton. I was just in Somerton actually last week. 12 months ago, it was dry as a bone. I was there just a week ago, drove through. It was lush and green and the place was alive. But it was such a joy for me to know that we worked hard to take the love of the gospel out to those people, and those people were blessed because we worked hard. They've received something which was a deposit of love in their hearts. And I know Shirley makes packs for Days for Girls, and she invites the community in to come in and make those Days for Girls packs, and they work hard to put it together. I think you get the idea of what I'm talking about. You know, it's not always that easy for Christians to get a hold of this idea that as Christians we do need to work. I mean, Paul had the problem with the Thessalonians. They thought Jesus was coming back soon, so hey, why bother doing anything? Why work at all? Let's just sit back. Someone will do the work for us. They'll bring us a cup of tea, a loaf of bread, whatever. We'll just enjoy, because Jesus has come back soon, so there's no point in working. And Paul had to remind them, hey guys, come on. Until Jesus shows up, we've got to work. And in fact, he tells them in 2 Thessalonians 3, 6 to 12, he says, hey guys, this is the rule we gave you. If you don't work, you don't eat. And I think it's a good message. It's a good message for our children to learn. It's a good message. Look, I'm not ashamed to say it, that there's some days in our household when I was growing up with the boys, I said, boys, if you don't work this afternoon doing what we need to do around this house, there's no dinner. Well, maybe we still gave them dinner, but there's definitely no dessert. You know, sometimes you just got to do that to show them what the value of work is. So it's important that we do that. Now, one of the things that Paul brings out actually in verse 25, he says, of Aphroditus, he's my brother, he's my co-worker. And what I like there is it's where we get our English word synergy from. I won't try and repeat the Greek word for it, but it is nearly the same. But this idea of synergy is when two single workers come together, the work that they do when they are together is actually greater than the sum of their individual parts. So it sounds all very mathematical, I know, but it's actually a multiplied return that happens when two come together. So it's not 1 times 1 equals 1, and it's not just 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's actually more like 1 times 1 is going to equal 4. That's what happens when you get synergy. There's a multiplied return for the work. In fact, in Ecclesiastes 4:9, it says, 2 are better than 1. They have a good return for their labor. That's a verse I like to read out at weddings, because it's so important that a married couple learn to work together. Work together, you'll get a multiplied blessing return. I'm not talking about just going out earning an income. Work together in love. Work together in care. Work together in uplifting and building one another up. Work together in bringing up the children. Work together. There'll be a multiplied return, a multiplied blessing as you co-labor together for the purposes of God. And that's why Jesus sent out the disciples in twos, in pairs. He didn't send them out one-on-one. He said, I want you to go out in pairs, because when one of you gets discouraged with that door slamming in your face, the other one will be there and say, come on, we can do this again. Let's go to the next door. Let's encourage one another. And you get through the persecution, you get through the hard times, and you advance the kingdom, because there's a multiplied return for your work. I'm running out of time now, but the sixth one is the sixth characteristic that we can learn from in what dependable people are like. They are like soldiers, willing to lay down their life. Epaphroditus, in verse 25, Paul called him my fellow soldier. In verse 30, we read that he risked his life. Dependable people have a soldier-like attitude where service is not seen as burdensome or work is not seen as drudgery. It's actually more like a call of duty. And this describes a willingness which is almost patriotic, except not for your country, but it's for your heavenly citizenship. This is what Paul wants to point out. There's a soldier attitude that we need as dependable people. And soldiers, they know what it means to be obedient, willing to follow orders from those in authority. And you can see when relationships break down and there's an unwillingness to follow instructions and things like that, then the work becomes to nothing, and situations just break down, and it's not how the Lord would want it to be. We need to know that we're following our Commander-in-Chief, Jesus. And he even says, look, I've given you leaders that make it a joy for you and for them. Be obedient to them, and you'll get great advancement. Be dependable people that are willing to be obedient to the instructions given from leadership. So Paul compares Christianity to soldiering. Is not unusual. He speaks to Timothy often in that tone. 2 Timothy 2:3-4, he says, "Join with me in suffering, like a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but rather he tries to please his commanding officer." In Ephesians 5, he likens the spiritual life as being dressed for battle like a soldier. He says we should hold the ground, standing firm against the enemy of our souls. Jesus commends the soldier centurion in Luke 7 that he has not seen such great faith that like that of the soldier. Why? Because he understands authority, understands where authority flows down, authority that he has, and that how authority can release great resources and great victories. So coming back to relationships, the context of Paul using the fellow soldier is also a great example, and it explains a willingness to endure persecution and opposition together. You see, the bonds of friendship that are forged during extreme circumstances are often unbreakable, and this is what great soldiering is commended for. When two men get into the foxhole, if they may not agree in the ideology that brought them into that foxhole, or into that trench to defend their ground, so to speak, they may not agree with the brigadiers, the captains, or especially the prime ministers who sent them there. But what they will agree on, and what makes them great soldiers, is that they're there for their mate next to them. They're there for their fellow soldier. And when they have that mindset, those types of armies are very hard to break. And that was something that the Roman army was renowned for, that they stood in the line not so much for Rome, they stood in the line for each other. They were there to protect each other, and often they would put a shield up over their heads, their own shield of their neighbour, of their fellow soldier. They would be there for one another, and they were able to bring great victories because they were men who were dependable as soldiers, looking out for one another. And so Paul is saying of Epaphroditus, he's a man who is dependable. He is willing to face off against the enemy right alongside of me. He's willing to lay down his life and risk everything for the sake of the gospel. Wow. Now, I think that's a characteristic we need more of, that from dependable men and women in the church, that we have this soldier attitude. And I believe that, in the future days, we're going to need more of this type of attitude. Persecution will increase, and we'll need to stand alongside each other as soldiers of the faith. We don't know what the future holds, and the Bible paints some pretty bleak circumstances in some regards. But how will we get through them? How do believers in persecuted countries right now get through it? They get through when they're dependable and they're looking after each other, protecting one another, and having a soldier-like faith for one another. So let's remind ourselves of the type of people you can depend upon. They're not perfect people. They're not the beautiful people, the most talkative people. They're not necessarily the most gifted people or the wealthiest people. You know what? They're usually quite regular as people. But Paul says you can honour people like these. We need to honour dependable people. Why? Because they're people who care. They're people that act as family. They are people that are willing to serve. They are able to represent well, and especially represent the interests of Jesus well. They're willing to work. That's what dependable people are. They're willing to work. And they are like soldiers. They have a soldier attitude. They carry themselves as ones who are willing to get in the trench and be there protecting their fellow soldiers. These are the people that Jesus says, you know what? I'm going to build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail. This is how he builds his church, friends. He doesn't build it with some sort of randomness or whatever. He builds it with people, living stones who are joined together. He builds it with people who can be dependable. And it's these people who make the greatest difference. They make a big difference in my life. They made a big difference in Paul's life. These dependable people make a big difference in the life of Grace Church. And so, church, I bring a challenge to you. Ask yourself, are you that type of person? Are you a dependable person? Are you someone that can be relied upon? That you will stay there in the thick and the thin of it? That you will exhibit these characteristics? And that others will say of you, look, I know no one else like James. I know no one else like Peter. I know no one else like Stephen. I know no one else like a Katie or a Julie, who will represent, not just represent their own interests, but they would be more concerned about representing the interests of Jesus. Wow, that's the type of person I want to be, you know. I don't want to be one of those lazy pastors. I'm not saying there is lazy pastors, but I don't want to be that type of person. I don't want to put a label on it. Type of person who just sits back and waits for everybody else to do the work. I want to be that person who gets in, gets alongside, helps to make it happen, who's regarded as dependable. And so, church, these are the type of people who will take Grace Church into the next 25 years of our future that hasn't been written into a book yet. We've done our first 25 years. They've been wonderful, and they were filled with dependable people that made it happen. But our next 25 years are going to be amazing, wonderful, exhilarating, multiplied, powerful years. But it'll only happen if there's dependable people that can make it possible. Then I'm looking forward to the next season, because it'll be filled with pioneers. It'll be filled with church planters. It'll be filled with kingdom builders. And it'll be filled with people who are difference makers. The question is, are you going to be one of those people? And I pray that you are. I already know there's already 100 or more of those types of people around Grace Church already that make this a wonderful church. And I'm just looking forward to so many more, because we need you. We need you, dependable people. God has such great plans for us and a big future. And we just need to cooperate, be co-laborers with Him, co-workers with our leaders, co-workers with Jesus in rescuing, in presenting Him to this community, to the glory of His name. God bless you, church. I pray that this message has stirred you, has called you to make some adjustments, and that will lead you into a new way of living that makes a big difference. Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for the people that are part of Grace Church. I pray you bless them now, Lord, as they examine their hearts and invite your Holy Spirit in. I pray that through the power of your Holy Spirit, we would all become these dependable people. We would all become these people that make a great difference, and that we can bring great change to the world around us for the glory of your name. Amen. God bless you, church. I'll see you next time.